Hey devs, April here. Welcome to another Learn with Experts live stream. In this series, I invite folks to deep dive into a particular area of the product while giving you the opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. This channel is all about helping you to be the best Appian developer you can be, so make sure you subscribe to never miss new videos or live streams. Now, Case Management Studio, it's been the talk of the town in Appian circles. But what does allowing business users to manage activities, datas, and workflows on their own mean for Appian developers? Well, this is what we're going to be talking about today. And we want you to be a part of that conversation, so don't be a stranger. I'll be monitoring the chat throughout the stream so that we can answer your questions. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to bring out some of the incredible team behind CMS with a combined over 30 years of Appian experience. We have Dan, Rachel, and Brian. Hello, everybody. Good to see you. All right, let's do some quick intros around the horn. Dan, why don't we start with you? Who are you? How long have you been at Appian? What do you do here?
Hey, I'm Dan Tobias. I have been at Appian for like 9 years. I'm a lead product engineer. I started in our customer success and then moved to engineering like 4 years ago. I helped build the Case Management Studio application, and I just found out we have to give a fun fact. So I like boating. I own a boat, and I live in Fort Lauderdale right now. So.
Yeah. What was the joke, Rachel? Sail and sail?
Dan sails so that he can sail.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, Rachel, anyone who joined us in the last live stream about translation sets may recognize you. You had such a great time that you just had to come back. But for anyone new, why don't you give a quick intro as well?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Rader. I'm a product manager at Appian. Been here for 10 years. And last time you may have listened to me talk about translation sets, but I work on Case Management Studio too, and I'm responsible for the studio piece of it. So we're going to take a look at that today.
Cool. And Brian? Oh, fun fact.
I blew it. I should have said nothing. I don't sail, but I do like to be on boats. But I get really motion sick, so I have to be careful about when I do it. And
yeah. Okay, fair. Brian, last but not least.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Brian Graney. I'm a product manager on Case Management Studio. I've been with Appian for about 8 years, and like Dan and Rachel, I have some prior implementation experience for building applications for our customers and customer success. So that was about the first 4 years of my time at Appian, and I've been in product for the last 4. And so excited to speak with you all today about Case Management Studio and what it has to offer for you as developers. And a fun fact for me is, unlike the water, I like to be in the sky. So I'm currently working on my pilot's license and really enjoying all of that. So
that's
which makes my boating fun fact so lame in comparison.
But okay, who's the lamest here?
Rachel and I will come for rides in the boats and in the planes. So, it's good to have friends who do these things, right? Great. All right. Well, let's get right into it. So to start, and this may be like a pretty simple question, but some people may not be aware. What is Case Management Studio? Rachel, why don't you take that one?
Sure. So Case Management Studio, well, developers, this is an application suite that comes with the platform. Case Management Studio refers to everything you need to build and use a case management application. So that includes this workspace interface that we're looking at right here, which is where end users do casework. And it also includes the studio piece where your business users can actually configure things that show up in workspace. So it's the combined package that makes up Case Management Studio.
Cool. Yeah. So they are just sites basically, for lack of a better term, but there's a lot built out under the hood, and we'll be going back and forth between the front end and the back end to see, what kind of Appian objects are actually being built. So Dan, why don't you talk us through like a little bit of what we're seeing here maybe, and where we'll get started.
Yeah. So this is the workspace site in Studio. So this is where your caseworkers will actually go and work cases. So each, the homepage is tailored for each user. So up top, I can see my cases. I can see tasks that I have to do for those cases. we have a calendar of due dates and deadlines. And of course, you can drill into each case to see more information about it and do whatever work you have to do for that case.
Cool. Now, if you go back for 1 second, I did notice that it looks like on those different cases, some of them have different prefixes. So does that mean this is really just like one view where any type of case I have access to will all be in this one place and I don't need to go to multiple different sites? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, exactly. This is like your holistic landing page for all the cases that you might be assigned or working.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. So, I mean, let's go through a little bit more and see, what different entities we're working with and things like that. So, Rachel, why don't you take us through a little bit where we should go?
In Workspace, or you want to jump to Studio?
I don't know. I guess
Probably.
maybe we could just talk about like the different. Do you think it's easier to talk about it here or in Studio?
I think let's go to Studio.
Okay.
That's
All right.
the fun part that I work on.
Okay. Fair.
Yeah. So you saw there's like runtime data, what cases are in progress there, but let's jump over to Studio to see how the business user configurations come together to make that case type that can be kicked off in Studio.
Gotcha.
Or that can be kicked off in Workspace. So again, Studio is a site. Here it is. You can see Studio in the top right. And what we're looking at right now are the case types that have been configured so far. They're organized into 2 categories here, and then the case types are the things listed below. So we're going to drill into a specific category and case type. And today we're going to be talking about hackathons. So this case type is, what does it take to make a hackathon? You all know April is the queen of hackathons, so this is really a real life story about what April's job is. So here we're drilling into the hackathon case type. You can see across the bottom there are 4 different elements of setting up that hackathon case type, and we've preloaded something. So we'll walk through each of those today, and also be switching over to Appian Designer, so we can talk about the differences between what a business user does here and what you do as a designer in your typical development environment.
Cool.
So yeah, I think the first thing we're going to look at is data. So just going top to bottom down that list. So what we see here is the data model for the hackathon case type. And there's a visualization of it, but what we see in that main pane right there is 3 different sections. This is a hierarchy where specifically for hackathon case types, there's some data that we want to capture about just hackathons. In the middle, this is the YouTube live streams category, and there's some data that's common to every kind of case that lives in that YouTube live streams category. And then finally at the bottom, there's also data that you may want to capture for every case in the system, and that's where you configure these. So here, usually when you're building out an application, the customer is definitely going to want to see some reports about the cases in their system. And by having this data model structured as tiers like this, it really helps with reporting later, because those fields that are common across many case types are actually defined in a common place, so that you can build reports across many case types later if you need to look at data at the category or all case types level.
Okay. So speaking of reports, that makes me think, looking at this, I'm probably missing something that might be good to report on, which is, how much money are we giving away? What are the prizes for these hackathons? So maybe we should add that as a field.
The best part. What do you
Yes.
get? Yeah. So Dan built out this screen we're looking at right here. So
Yeah.
Going to add a data field right here to capture the prize. And it's going to be in dollars. So capture that as, you can do a decimal. Yeah. If you knew it was always whole numbers, then you could choose. Okay. Yeah. We'll do integer. That's easier.
I feel like giving out pennies and cents maybe is not, I don't know.
Well, look, the difference between $1,000 and $1,000.10 is non-zero, April. So
Fair.
Yeah. Okay. So we have that prize in dollars field. And we can pause here. You can see this new field has been added in Studio, but what does that mean on the back end? Well, these categories and case types, these are actually record types. Just your normal Appian record types, like you might build from scratch in Appian Designer. So you can pop over and take a look at the case types one. And what this means is that through Studio, your business users are generating and modifying real Appian objects. And so you as developers, like, you want to know what that Studio user has been up to. So the way it works is that anytime a user is generating an object or modifying one, we throw that into this Studio generated objects application. And it's in a package so that any associated database scripts that are required for the changes they've made to record types are also attached to that package.
Wow.
So this is like, basically, we want to make sure that you know what's happening, and you're going to have your own deployment process that's specific to your customer, your environment. But we want to make sure that you can find out everything that's happened through Studio, and then arrange it into other packages, or basically choose how you deploy it.
I did not realize about the package thing, and that is awesome. I think that's a really nice feature. And since you just mentioned DevOps, what is kind of like the best case scenario? Like, are end users going to be in prod making these updates, or is this kind of like, we'll give them access to dev to the Studio site, and then we can take these packages and put it through our normal like DevOps flow?
Well, if you found a customer who wants people generating design objects in production, like, let me know, because I haven't found one yet. This is definitely a dev activity. And think of it as a way to bring your business users into the development process. They have Studio, which is their place to do the activities that are that they know how to do well, and they don't have to be fully trained Appian developers because it's a more controlled environment. And we'll take a look at some of those other controls later. But do this in dev. We know you want to review it, test it, make some changes, and incorporate feedback before you deploy. So yeah, definitely think of this as an activity to be done in dev.
Cool. All right, let's keep going. What else we got here?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So here's that hackathon record type. Just wanted to show off. This is a record type. There's no surprises here. We just added that prize in dollars field, and it shows up as a record field alongside all of the others. And then let's take a look at the relationships too. So you can see here, our hackathon case type is related to the YouTube live streams record type. Just again, normal record relationships. The intent is that the user doing things in Studio, when it modifies or generates objects, we want it to, be what you might build yourself. And so it's not a surprise to you as developers going in to review this work. And then again, it's that one is related to the all cases data.
So, okay, I guess a couple of questions, and maybe Dan, since you worked on building this out, maybe you can explain it a little bit. So we have our top level all cases data. So basically that is like the topmost level, and any case, even if like one's related to the IT department, one's related to finance, they all are those top level all cases. And then we make cases underneath it. Is that correct? Like how the structure works?
Yeah. So for each case type you make, there'll be like a dedicated table for data specific to that case type. And then there's a dedicated table specific for that case category. And then there's the shared all cases data. So all three of those are like a one-to-one relationship. And it kind of creates this like sprawling tree of like a very normalized data model, but it also lets you get like as prescriptive as you need for segmenting your data across case types.
Gotcha. And what if we need to add some security to that? Like, how do we add security between the case types if we only want finance people to be able to touch the finance ones and other people to be able to touch the other ones?
So all these child tables just inherit security from their parent, which is like a standard way to secure child records. So you would just go to your main case table and then set up whatever record level security you want there. So at that table, the main case table relates to case type. So you could build in your own rules to secure certain case types to certain departments.
Gotcha. So that's a good example of where this is something where the developer would step in and kind of help that business user get set up before kind of, letting them, go wild in Studio. Cool. All All right, Rachel, what should we check out next?
Let's go back to Studio and let's move down to that intake form page. So obviously with Case Management Studio, your case types can have custom data models, and we need to capture data for those custom data fields. So that's what this next step is doing. Here we're looking at the form that is used to initially capture the case information. That's the case intake form. You can see a preview of it here. It's interactive, so your business user can come in here and test it out and see what's there. But if they want to come in and make a change, such as to capture a new field that we just added, then we're going to go ahead and click edit and launch the form building experience. And so I know all of you watching, you've built interfaces in Appian, you've used Interface Designer, and this probably looks pretty familiar. What we're looking at is a completely no-code form building experience where the type of interface that you're building is that case intake wizard. So we're seeing the pages of the wizard, the fields in each page, and here the user can drag and drop new fields into that form and then do a little bit of configuration. That's a subset of what you might be doing in Appian Designer. So let's drag that new field in for our prize. We can change the label, and here you can see label instructions required, mapping the data to a variable and then configuring some validations. There's a lot more things you can do in Interface Designer, but some of them are more advanced or really not necessary for this wizard use case. So this is really a condensed and safe place for your business user to do some form building. Here we're mapping it to our prize in dollars field. If we forgot to make that field, we could add a new one from here, but obviously we just did that on the data page.
That is very helpful. It's like when you started being able to add rule inputs from different areas.
Yeah, those forward flows, so that the thing that you need to do next is right in front of you.
Yeah.
And then one more thing to note here is that validation section. Many of you are probably accustomed to writing expressions for your validations, but here in Studio, we are offering some basic no-code validations for certain input types because we don't expect your business users to know Appian or know the expressions language. And so they can do some point and click setup here. And so April, is there a cap on what price you're allowed to add?
I mean, I guess it depends. This year, the Live Build Challenge prize is $30K. So that's pretty wild.
I think we need this to be 30,001 then. Yeah. or 30K because it's equal to. Okay.
Dan's like, let's go higher.
What about next year? Next year?
Okay. Yeah. Well, if we needed to come in and change this value next year, Studio allows you to do that, so you can. But I like the forward thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's our intake form. We added our new field, and I think next, let's take a look at the interface that backs this form, and then after that, Brian will talk about workflow because he's the expert there.
When does it decide to make a new package? So I noticed it just added that one to the package that was already there.
If there isn't a package for Studio development, it will make one. If there is one, it will just keep adding to it.
Okay.
And then when you do deploy this to a higher environment, the recommended procedure is to check the box to delete the package after deployment.
Okay.
So, because once the database scripts are deployed, you don't want those lingering around anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So then you won't have a package, and then it'll make a new one. Gotcha.
Cool.
All right. So here's our lovely intake form interface. So you can see in the live view here, it's got those same fields that we were just looking at in Form Builder. The interface here is just yet another Appian interface, an object you're familiar with. And you can see that many of the fields in here are just the normal out-of-the-box fields, dates, integers, paragraphs, and they're already wired up to the values that they got mapped to. In this integer field that we just added, you can see in the validation section, there's this Aving Studio validation number less than upper limit. This is a Studio specific function that is responsible for those no-code validations that were configured through Studio. And you can see it's got, it's got that limit and a couple other parameters. And so there's several of these functions that are for validations, and they're all pretty straightforward like this. They have descriptive intent-based names, so whenever you see a rule in an interface that's got that Studio underscore, you should know that this is something that is either generated by Studio or it's a rule that is used specifically in Studio to perform some activity.
So is that something that developers shouldn't touch or try to like build on their own using those Abank Studio components or expressions?
Yeah, so it depends. These validations one like this, like you can guess what it's doing. It's it's taking care of that logic for you. If you wanted to copy and paste this on another field and change the the value that it's checking, like go for it. The Studio site itself, we do not advise changing the way that site is put together, because we will be releasing new features, new types of configurations that you can do in Studio, and we want to make sure that you can take those updates.
Gotcha. So what are Dan? Can you bring us back to Appian Designer to like the all applications view? I guess, can you guys quickly, just while we're on this topic, talk through what are the things we can and cannot update as developers, or should and shouldn't update?
Yeah, so really it's just that second one from the bottom, the Studio module there. That's the one where the Studio site and everything in it, that's where all that stuff lives. That's the one that you should leave alone. But Brian can talk about the workspace and all of the others too.
Yeah, sure. So one of the reasons you're seeing several application containers on this page is because we've built Case Management Studio intentionally with a modular architecture. And what that means is that the site, like the workspace you saw, it lives in that Case Management Studio base application container. And so that's all of the things that we know are kind of the bread and butter of case management, no matter your use case. And the reason we built it this way is so that you as developers have a really good starting point from a data model, from an interface design, accessibility. All of that has sort of been taken care of for you with this architecture. So if you need to clone these objects to extend and customize the workspace, we encourage you to do that. And really, the ability to accelerate your development with these starting points is going to be super important going into projects using Case Management Studio. And then on top of that, if you go back to the application view, Dan, you can see there's several other application containers. We talked about Studio. There's also Report Builder, which is some of our end user reporting capabilities. We also have several other modules. One is a public portal. So if your use case has unauthenticated access for users to come in and create their cases, we have a module for that. And our whole intent is to continue to deliver new modules so that as a developer, you can take on that new functionality, install the application container, and set it up very much like you would like an app market package, where there's a few setup steps. But even if you've customized your base application container, you'd still be able to take on that new functionality. And so that's one of the insights into what this modular architecture provides, and why we encourage you to change and customize, as needed for the use case, your workspace and everything.
Gotcha. And so we saw like packages when we're doing updates, like that's pretty helpful. What are the things that we should deploy to prod the first time we're setting this up? Because I guess we probably don't need everything that's in there, right? Maybe. Brian?
Yeah, so the Case Management Studio base is that whole workspace experience. So we definitely encourage that to be deployed. Likewise, the Studio module, which is that design tool for business users we were just looking at. We encourage everyone to use that. It's a great feature to be able to, quickly in sprint zero, showcase value and have your business users part of that collaborative experience to build out that first prototype. And then Report Builder, we also encourage you to use as some of our end user reporting capabilities, though the platform is also working to incorporate some of that into the product itself. But that would be kind of the bread and butter we want you to start with, is what's shown here. Other than maybe the March Madness app that
that's right. That's right. That's from the last live stream. Plug the translation set live stream.
That one gets auto deployed to production.
So before we move on, just saw a quick question and reminder, throw your questions in the chat. So Jason says, can we have show when conditions from Studio, or is that a developer enhancement?
Yeah, so right now that's not something that can be configured through Studio. So the like conditional display, conditional validation, those actually are like fairly straightforward configurations that we could offer through no code that I think should be in Studio, but they aren't there yet. So for any of that additional logic that you want to add to your forms, go ahead and do that in Interface Designer, and maybe one day it will be in Studio. But that is a good segue into like what happens if I do make changes to the interface as a low code developer. What does that mean for Studio?
Yep.
It's very intentional that we are generating real Appian objects with out of the box like functions and everything as much as possible, because we know that there's going to be some custom requirements that you have for your client where you need to go in here and tweak these interfaces to be exactly what you need. Do that. And in actually, I think Dan, you just made one of those changes, right? You added the show when down there.
Yeah, but I didn't.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So go ahead and add it back or do something, and we'll go back into Studio and see what that looks like. But basically, the intent is that it's not a one-way door. If you build something in Studio and then add a tweak later as a low-code dev, like you can still go back to Studio and look at that interface and depending on what change you actually made, you should still be able to tweak the things as a Studio user in Studio, the things that you could have built through Studio in the first place. So if you need to add a component to this form that's not one that you can add through Studio yet, go ahead and add it. When you open up that same form in Studio, that component is just going to be read-only. It still renders. The Studio user will be able to see the whole form. They can change the other, like fix their typos in the labels or whatever they need to do. But then, yeah, this one down here is just not one that you would then be able to like fully edit in the side pane there through Studio. But if you can drag it around if you need to reorder them. So yeah, our intention is that you can still do as much as possible through Studio, so that it's both like any of these interfaces or record types. It's something that both users can still work on.
Gotcha. So it's essentially anything you'd be able to do in Studio. Those are the kind of changes that if you make as a developer, you'll be able to still make in Studio. But obviously, this is like a interface designer light to cater to our end user and like the most common things that they probably need. So, we don't have as many options there on the left-hand side, but still a good amount to get most of what you need done.
Yeah,
right?
and growing. Stay tuned. So you can see that this requiredness, Dan changed it to be an expression, and so the Studio user, like they don't know expressions, they shouldn't be modifying with that because they could really change the intent of the form.
Mm-hmm.
So that parameter is it now just has this message. So they get the feedback about why it is in this state, but they're not able to do anything destructive with it.
All right, so this all seems pretty powerful. Right now, this is like mostly data and interfaces. I'd love to get into, the bread and butter of Appian, the BPM. Anything else you wanted to add, Rachel, on this section, or Dan, before I ask Brian to tell us about, workflow?
No, let's take it over to Brian.
Great. Right. So now that we have configured our data in our intake form, let's dive into the workflow here. So this view is also part of the Studio experience. It's again tailored for that business user to be able to build out workflows, be able to visualize the workflow that they're building out, and quickly make changes to the workflow for a given case type. So if we start on the top of the page, you can see we're on all case types, YouTube live streams, hackathons. This workflow is specific for how April and her team, is going to manage the hackathon when we go to kick it off. So there's a few steps here. One is, let's define the goals and objectives of the hackathon, review the event submission. Do we have the budget to move forward with this? If we do have the budget, let's start to execute upon that. So, there's marketing materials, promotion, developing the prompts, curating the judges panel, the ultimate scorecard review of how are we going to judge these people and their submissions. And then we have some steps down here, collect feedback, maybe after the hackathon, you want to send out a survey. But what this is missing is what are we doing the day of the hackathon? That's a critical period for the event organizers, the planners, the judges. So we're able to come in here and add some additional steps to this workflow. And in order to do that, there's this add tasks capability on the top. And if we pause on the screen for a moment, you can see that we actually already have in the system several tasks that we've configured, as well as strings of tasks, which we call task blocks. And this is your ability to reuse content as a starting point when you're building out a workflow. So kind of similar to what we saw in the data, there's some data that applies to all cases. Well, there's also some tasks that apply to all of your case type workflows. And to be able to save off those tasks into repeatable things that could be dragged into these different case types is super important. And what we're showing here is on the task block page, we actually are able to drag in 2 tasks that we typically always do on hackathons. And again, this is kind of simpling down the use case a bit, but maybe we want to send a reminder email and then also announce the results and winners on the day of. So we can add this into our workflow by clicking that add button. And you can see here, we just drop those into the workflow. They're the 2 purple icon nodes you see on the top right. The reason they're color coded is because each of these nodes is related to a milestone. And milestones are a way where you can group tasks that are functionally similar together so that you can visually represent them in the workflow. You can report on them through metrics, whether it's feeding them into Process HQ, your own reporting. It's a great way to kind of understand how those tasks are flowing throughout the workflow. And you can see Dan is setting up some dependents and precedents here so that we can slot in exactly where we want this in the workflow. And you can see that we've incorporated this into the workflow after scorecard review, leading into collect feedback. So this is a really natural progression of how we want these activities to occur on the day of. Now, the other thing I'm going to point out is you have these different task types. So there's confirmation, which you see here, which is simply someone acknowledging that they've completed the task. We also have some additional task types like decision tasks. If we scroll up in this workflow visualization, you can see we have a decision task on the budget approval, whether we've approved the budget or not. And looking at both the workflow on the right and the logic configuration in the middle pane where the mouse is over, you can see that for each of the responses and the decision task, you actually have complete control for what task that then leads into in the workflow. So this provides a tremendous power to a business user, which they otherwise wouldn't have in order to configure this logic accordingly. So if the budget is rejected, we can go back in the workflow. If the budget is approved, we can proceed forward to those parallelized tasks. And if we click into one of those drop downs on the leads into selection in the middle, you can see just how many options we have for leads into. Any task in the workflow you can adjust accordingly to move on and progress through or to loop back. Now, for a decision task type, if we actually go into one of those on the configuration side, maybe we can cancel out of this for a second. I do want to just point out how you configure these tasks to begin with. So we were able to drag all these into the workflow, but if we go up to the top of this site under tasking, this is essentially your reference library of tasks and task blocks that you're able to drag through into here to complete in the palette. And this is all business user configurable as well. So if we dive into a decision task type, there might be one down there. Yeah, the budget approval one. This is something where you have control as a business user to be able to provide up to 5 response options here for the task itself. And, this is giving the business user control for how the workflow progresses. And so that's what the business user is configuring on task configuration, and then through all the way to building up task blocks, which can all both then be combined into that overall workflow for your case type. So we can dive maybe back into that workflow we saw for hackathon. And you can see both on the visualization on the right and on the left, we have a good indication of how these tasks are going to be progressed through in our workflow.
So when we're updating all this, what is happening on the back end? Are you guys are creating process models and everything, or what's happening? No.
These are database driven tasks.
Cool.
Everything in case management is what we call like a record-centric design. So you won't have any long living processes or anything.
Cool.
So whenever a task becomes available, the actions on it to complete it or reassign it or skip it all become available. And then as you progress and complete tasks, the next ones will open up. So in that same manner, the task, record or table in the database tracks all the historical information about who completed tasks, when they were completed, and everything.
So are these, are these stored in like the live stream table and the hackathon table, or are these part of like Case Management Studio tables that kind of control all of this from a higher level?
These are in a separate table. So there's quite a few tables to handle tasks. But the runtime tasks that like a user creates, akin to like a process node, would be in just the task table.
Okay.
And then there's configuration tables, which actually holds like the model of the workflow, which is akin to process models.
Okay.
Even though this is a record-centric design, the easiest way to conceptualize the tasking is to think about it as a process model. So in Studio, what you're building is the model, and these are the nodes. And then on a specific case in Workspace, each case has like a process instance, which is the set of tasks that are being worked on for that case.
Can you show us some of this, Dan?
Sure. So if we go to the hackathon case from 2023, which I guess was abandoned because we didn't actually do it. But you see here that in 2023, this was the workflow for the hackathon. So these are like the runtime tasks. And for each task, you can complete the task, change the assignees, mark it as not needed, or change when it's due. And then as you complete tasks, the next ones will open.
Gotcha.
Yeah, another thing to call out here too is that the reason we sort of save off that runtime tasking as well is because caseworkers, who are the end users of this case record, can actually go in and make ad hoc modifications by either adding a new task, maybe a specific hackathon needs a variation in the workflow that you didn't have configured in Studio. You can make those game time decisions here and actually update the workflow for this hackathon. And you can see that on the top left. We have like create new from template. Like you can add new tasks or even create new tasks to drag into this workflow ad hoc as well. So while business users are configuring this, caseworkers also are a user of this capability to be able to make those ad hoc changes. And so, yeah, we can maybe, if we do want to go into the back and see kind of how this is set up on the database side, or how the process completion works. The other thing we didn't really dive into yet is, you can actually extend and customize for different task types. So if you have in your process, you need to send an email notification, generate a document, or any sort of thing that's maybe not attended by a human, you can have control for that customization and add different task types to the data model, and then configure what sort of logic you want to run when that task executes in the complete task process.
Yeah, if you could show us a little bit on the back end, I'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, and this is definitely a low-code dev activity here.
Yeah. And I guess, Dan, maybe while you're opening what you need to open, we did have a question in the chat from Mick Knott, maybe, new to Appian, and I'm starting with Case Management Studio. So steps to first get started. First step, is the first step designing the data model? Would you guys, is that what you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, we put it at the top of that list because we think it is a likely place to start. I mean, with a lot of Appian design, data is the first place that you start. Now, I will say that for some case management use cases, we see a lot of variation in the workflow. Sometimes we see a lot of variation in the data model, and sometimes we see a lot of variation in both. So if you're, just learning the ropes, definitely play with all of those things and get really familiar with them. In practice, you might see a lot more of one or the other, because case management is such a like hugely variable space that there's like we have a lot of common functionality and configurations available here, but the way that they actually show up in practice can be very different from case to case.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. So this is the task record. So this controls all tasking for the whole, for any type of case type, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So if I needed to, as a low code dev, come in and say, add that email node, right? Maybe the reminder email, I want that to be able to be automated. I don't have to worry about doing that. So what should I do to do that?
So this is the task runtime table. So this just tracks all the tasks in the system. So you can see, all the tasks and the one that I completed just now. But there's a task behavior type table, which, so these are the types of tasks we have. Out of the box, there's confirmation, decisions, and document upload tasks. But what you can do is add other tasks, which are, as Brian was alluding to, automated. So if it's automated, it's basically backed by like a process model that's going to just do the task. And then you would have to go in and actually make that model. So in the case of like send an email, you would set up the process model to send the email with the right parameters. But in the case of these ones, which are not automated, they all have like a UI for the user to complete them. And so you would decide, build that UI as well.
Okay. So and then that's something that in Studio they could pick that task type, or is that separate?
Yeah. So basically, like if you wanted to add new capabilities for like different task types, like we talked about, either it's a new attended one, like a checklist, or it's an unattended one, like a send email node. Basically, a low-code developer can follow the same paradigm here with our data model, our interfaces, our process models, get those building blocks set up, and then a business user would be able to immediately benefit from those when they're in Studio, either building those reference tasks we saw, those task blocks that are those repeatable strings of tasks, or even the workflow itself for a case type. And then the other benefit is that as a caseworker, when you're in the context of that specific case, like we saw with Hackathon 2023, you can actually call some of those task types as well, and immediately benefit from what the low-code developer was able to extend in the solution.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely pretty powerful. And I feel like already with Appian's drag and drop capabilities and interface designer, process model and stuff, it was already, and you guys coming from all of you coming from, CS know this, like a little easy to be interactive with the customer, but now it's like even more power in that sense because they're able to do a little bit more on their own and be empowered to like work on these sorts of things, right?
Yeah. And basically the intent is that the activities that they know really well, what is the workflow, what are the requirements, what are things called, we're exposing ways for them to take care of that part so that you as developers can focus on the more technical aspects of the project and the other parts of the platform that are not exposed through Studio.
Yeah. So this, it may seem like this new crazy paradigm, but it is what Appian has always been of, hey, every quarter we're coming out with something new that's going to make your life easier and faster so you can do more other stuff, right? So this is just taking that, to a whole new level. Okay, is there anything else we want to talk about here on this page or in Studio in general?
I think we should spend a quick second on that summary page down there. So you all know what a record summary is, and this page in Studio is where you can choose which of your case types data fields show up on that summary page. So there's a lot of stuff that shows up by default in Workspace, but you're adding custom fields here, and so you need to say, yes, I want these new fields to show up on the summary view too. So you can see here we've already configured 4 to show up on this hackathon case type, and it is not automatically all of the fields that you've added to that case type. You can pick and choose as appropriate. And then the second thing on that page in Studio is this edit form. Obviously the caseworkers, like we don't get everything right the first time. So there needs to be a way for those caseworkers to update the case and fix their typos or make changes. And so that is the form that you're building right here. You click in it, Dan. Yeah, okay. So this is going to generate another interface. And here you can see, because we already built the intake form, you have the option of copying that one to get started for your edit form. And in many cases, they're very similar, but we also know it can be pretty common for initial case creation to just be a subset of the data that's needed to fully process the case type. So that's why you have the option of building them out separately, since the same thing might not make sense in both contexts. But this is yet another interface, same component, same configuration, same experience that your user would get when designing the intake form that we already looked at.
Cool. Yeah, so I mean, chat, we'll start wrapping up here a little bit. I have some questions I wanted to pose to you guys, but another last chance for anyone tuning in to ask questions you may have. We do have one that came up from Raj B. So for automated task, which task type should you select? So we just mentioned this a little bit ago, but Dan, if you could go back to that task record. So essentially here, you're actually defining it, right? So you are creating a new task type that then can be selected just like the other default ones.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so I'll get started by asking, maybe this is a high level question. What's the vision and purpose of this? Because, many years ago we had quick apps and things like that. But what is, you guys as PMs, what's your vision for how Case Management Studio can evolve and help grow the Appian platform?
You want me to go,
Hard
Brian?
Hard
Sure,
question.
you can go first. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, Brian already talked about that investment in the modules and really adding a lot of common functionality that you can pick and choose what to install for your case. So that is absolutely part of it. There's this kind of like core experience of that workspace in Studio that we've been focused on here. But case management, so many people use Appian for case management already that we've learned a lot from what people build over and over, and that's what we want to make available for free to really, as part of buying Appian, but with Case Management Studio, to really reach that 80% of what are the common features that people use, what are the common configurations that are required to first set up that app, and then on the Studio side, it really is our intention to keep investing here and put more power safely into the hands of business users to do that upfront configuration, all the while knowing that this is an application that you as low-code developers are probably going to still be customizing and making sure that experience is cohesive.
So, customizing, right? We want to make sure both sides have the power to customize, but that seems like it might make it a little bit more complicated in terms of backwards compatibility, which something as Appian developers, we know and love that we don't have to do anything and suddenly we get more power. So, what should developers be cognizant of to ensure that when new CMS versions come out, we'll have good backwards compatibility? I don't know if Brian or Dan, you want to take that one? Rachel took the last one.
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about why the modular architecture is our answer to kind of being able to get new functionality over time without having to have as big of a merge effort. So we want you to go into Designer and change objects that you need to in Workspace to best meet the use case. So that could be dragging around some of those different components we see here on the case summary to best fit the use case. It could be adding an entirely new section or a whole new site. All of that is fair game for you to do with Case Management Studio. And that's more of the transaction end user level side of the house. And that's the area where we want to continue to deliver a lot of our new functionality as separate application containers. So we may have, a DocuSign integration that we ship or a messaging system. All of those we want to be able to plug and play into Case Management Studio, where you install that new app, you incorporate it into a couple incorporation points, and you're up and running, whether you've customized or not. Now, there's the other side of it, which I can let Rachel maybe speak to, which is, these applications like Studio and whatnot, where you're doing the front end business user control, where it's a design tool, and like we may provide some additional flexibility later on to add new components. But right now, that's largely like Appian Designer, where we don't expect you to customize the code underlying that fully. So that's a little bit of how we expect you to get new functionality over time with modules, and why we're building Studio, so that business users can have more control for some of that decision points up front.
Gotcha. Well, so I guess another question here, and we do have a couple questions in the chat that I'll get to after this. So, when I deploy kind of an interface, usually it overwrites whatever's in prod, right? So is the recommendation I should duplicate this and then like change the site so it's referencing the duplicated one, so that when you guys push new CMS, it won't overwrite any changes? Or how is that going to work?
For the example being the interface we're on right now, like if you're to make changes to this, we don't expect you to duplicate this necessarily. I mean, there are versioning capabilities within our interface designer, so we would expect you to just change this directly. And the only time we would be shipping a new version of the summary page is if we release a new version of base, which largely, absent of like some small UX changes, which you probably wouldn't benefit a ton from anyway if you customize this, you wouldn't really have to update your base. There may be instances where we release like a major version of base where we take on a whole new platform capability. Like if, for instance, we built this before Modern Records and now we build it with Data Fabric and all of the capabilities there, that might be an example of a major change where we release a new version of base. But at that point, it's kind of up to you and the customer and the technical architecture team to decide, is it worth the bite to upgrade this and merge it? Or do we just stick with what we have, because there's a lot of value derived from what we've extended and customized within Case Management Studio? So that's really a decision that's going to vary dependent on the impacts of those customizations and the decision point with the architecture team on the customer site.
And thinking, I mean, we think a lot about what is, like, how do you receive more of case management? What's the right way to do that? And ultimately, the platform, you might upgrade the platform and then something new shows up in that Studio form builder, but that is that's not something that you would have been able to change anyway. So it's not gonna break anything. For the new application updates, like, it is your choice to install them. So there's always that decision point about what is this new thing? Do I want it? What's the right time to get it?
Gotcha. So because it's an application and it's not the base platform, you can, opt in or out. That makes sense. Okay. Well, this hour has flown by. So let's quickly get to these chat questions. So what are the different ways to start cases? Like, is there process models? So it seems like, and maybe Dan, you could take this one. It seems like the starting of new cases, that's something that's really built in, and you'll use the out of the box way to do that, right?
Yeah, but there's a few ways to do it. So there's the submit case action, which is, the most obvious one that will get demoed the most. So this is just somebody's logged into Appian and then creates the case through the intake form. And that's on the homepage, and it's, also on the cases tab. But backing that is just a process model that takes in like the case object that you're going to be creating. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I think we're maybe releasing a feature to
Brian, why don't you?
Yeah, I can. So we know that there's a strong use case to create cases from an external system, and I think that might be what the question's alluding to too. Is like, how can you get cases into this system that may not be started through the system submit case action or form here? So there's several ways that we're exploring on that with regards to web APIs. How do we get that data in from an external system? Provide some templates for you to get started. We know that the use cases around that vary tremendously in terms of what data you even want to kick off. It could be through a phone call that the case gets created. Like if someone's calling a support hotline, they type in a phone chain, that number gets tied to the case type, and the submitter is the phone number of the person who called. Like there's all sorts of ways that you can create cases, and there's different use cases we've heard. And for that reason, we're exploring providing templates for you to kind of get a leg up in creating those web APIs. but we're not going to nail it 100% for every use case. So that is another area where we do expect a low-code developer to be involved to extend those for the given use case and really get that last mile need.
Right.
Yeah. And then, so yeah, this is why the product managers are supposed to talk. But and then, as we did allude to, we have a portal module. So the portal that if you want to install to let unauthenticated users create cases, that also just calls the same process. And then, like I said, it's just a process. So if you have other ways that cases get created, like let's say certain cases can spawn follow-up cases, that's just an enhancement you can put into your case management app where after some certain case type is closed, maybe a follow-up case is created, and that just calls, again, that same process. So
cool.
There's many ways to kind of kick that off.
Cool. Thanks, Dan. All right, one more quick question before we close out. So is there an option to restrict users to see the list of cases based on some criteria like country code or anything like that? So how do we restrict users to certain cases?
Yeah, that's just going to be following Appian standard record level security. So here in your record level security rules, you can customize the security rules. So by default, all the internal users can see all cases. And then people who are not an internal user, so if you have like external users, they can only see cases in which they are related to, whether they're an assignee or in the assigned group. So you can just customize the record level security to match what cases you can see.
Cool. All right.
And then, because this may be a fear, there's documents, we do have a standard way. All documents for cases are put in a folder for that specific case. And then we have a rule that calculates which users can see those documents and sets that folder security. So that comes out of the box. And by default, it also follows this model. So if you do need to tweak this and documents are a big part of your cases and security of them is important, you would just adjust that rule to kind of mimic whatever rules you set up here. But it's fairly straightforward.
Cool. All right. This has been a great overview. I think that we probably need to have a follow-up soon, probably, after Appian World, and maybe we can just walk through extending entirely from the developer's perspective. But I think this was a really great overview going back and forth of what's happening. The TLDR is all of this is built on top of Appian. So that means you as developers, you can extend what Case Management Studio is creating for the most part, right? Cool. All right, let's close on out here. Dan, Rachel, Brian, so good to have you on today. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, and I hope to have you all back soon. Appian World is right around the corner. The four of us will all be there. Hope to see you there too. It's April 15th through 17th in DC. A lot of exciting things for developers there, our full dev day, as well as, of course, the live build challenge, which has a lot of new and exciting updates this year. That will be streaming on the YouTube channel on April 17th. To our lovely audience, thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed the stream, please hit the like button, let us know. Subscribe. We're so close to 5,000 subscribers, so it would be really great if you and your friends could subscribe. Any more questions, ideas for future streams, drop a comment or head on over to the community discussion boards. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.